Hello. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss how to write and read files in Python. In Python, you may create files, any kind of text file or any file with any other format. You can write data in that text file, or if there is an existing text file, you can retrieve that data in your code and work with it. So we are going to discuss how to write and read files in Python. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss how to read and write files in Python. Okay, so let's first discuss about writing files in Python. If you want to write a data in a file, you first have to create that file. And for the creation of file, we use a method in Python. It's called open. So in order to create a file in Python, we are going to use open function. So open function is a keyword or function of Python which creates a file. So it takes many inputs. So we are only going to discuss two types of inputs. So first input is going to be name of the file. So I am going to give it a name, test.txt. So it's a text file. And then second argument is going to tell Python what we are going to do with this file. Are we going to override this file if this file already exists, or we are going to append data to this file, or we are going to read this file. So let's talk about just writing the file. So in this case, we are going to write in this file. So for that we use w. This w tells Python that if this file does not exist, create a new file and write data to this file. Or if this file already exists, then override this file. So this open actually creates an object. So you can give it any name. So I want to call it file ID. This is a kind of file identifier. So this open function creates a file object. So we'll be using this file object to write data in this file, or if you would like to read data from this file. In that case, we are going to have R here. So okay, let me just first write here what kind of other options we can have here. W is for writing in a file, and R is used for reading a file, and A is used for appending data to the file. Okay, so we can discuss these one by one. Okay, for now we are discussing this W option. So in order to write data in this file by the name of test.txt, we can use this file object. So any operation that we are going to perform on this text file, for that we have to use this file object. Now there are a number of methods available for this file object. So this open has created an object by the name of file underscore ID. So if you want to see what are the methods available to use for this file object, you can simply use the name of object file underscore ID and write dot here. Then this is going to tell you everything, the methods available for this file object. Right, so there are close method, flush method, next, read lines, and seek. And so we are going to discuss some of these methods one by one. Okay, so there is one you can also use print statement to write data in this file. So for example, if I want to write some data in this file, so I can use statement print, and you can write anything here. Okay, so this is my first file. Let's say this is what you want to write in that file, and then comma. So now you have to tell that in which file you are going to write this statement. For that we are going to use this file identifier. So we are specifying here file, which file is equal to file underscore ID. So you have to use file here, file equal to file underscore ID. So now this line is going to be written in this file. So this line is going to be written in a file whose identifier is file underscore ID, or whose object is file underscore ID. That means this my first file is going to be written in this file test.txt. Okay, you can also write some other data. Let's say we are going to write print. Um, um, this is a text file, and again similarly we want to write this data in the same file underscore id. Okay, so we are done with writing these two lines in the file, but still these lines have not been written in the file, because in order to complete this writing in file, you have to close this file. So open actually opens up the file, but once you are done with writing the things you want to write in that file, you have to close that file. For that we use close method available for this object. So we are going to say file underscore id dot close. You can see that close is here, so you just press, and this has to be ended by the parenthesis. It is very important that you close your file using this close method. If you don't write this statement here, then this data will not be written in your file. Actually, Python buffers your data and it remains in your memory. It doesn't go to the hard disk. If you want your data to be stored in your hard disk, you have to close your file using a close method. Now let's run this file and see what happens. If you run this file, you see that nothing happens here. Actually, a file has been created in this folder. Whatever your current folder is, your file is going to be created in your current folder. So this is my current folder. I can go in that folder and see if there's a file test.txt. So I go here, I see that there's a file test. If you open this file, you see that two lines have been written. This is my first file and this is the text file. One thing you see here that first line has been printed on the first line and the second line has been printed on the second line. This is true only for a print statement. But if you use some other method to write a file, like there is a method called write available for this file underscore id object. If you use that method, then the data is not going to be written on different lines. You have to make sure that you write data on different lines on your own. Okay, now let's discuss a different way to write data in file. So let's comment this. We don't need it anymore. So we are going to comment this using the triple inverted commas. Okay, so let's again create a new file underscore id, the same id is equal to open, and let's give it same name test.txt, and again we are going to write data in the file. So remember, this file is already there. So test.txt is an existing file because we have created it before. So you will see that if I use w again here, this data is going to be overwritten. Okay. So now I'm going to use a method available for this file underscore id object to write the data in this file. So I'm going to use that method. So file underscore id dot. You see that you have this method write. So you can use this method write to data in this file. So I'll use that instead of using print statement. So write. So I can write the same line here. This is my first file, and if you write something else, you can write in just one string, or you can break that into two strings. It's up to you. Let's see what happens if we write two different lines using the write statement. id write, this is a text file. Let's see what happens. And so let's close the file underscore id dot close. Make sure to close your file, otherwise data will not be written in your file. Now let's save it and run it, and let's see what happens. We run it and we check the file again. So you see that now we have data, the previous data is gone because of the w. So the purpose of w is to create a new file or overwrite the data if the file is already an existing file. So what is the difference between writing data using print function or using write function? You see that when we used this print function, the two lines were written on two different lines. because the print by default starts with a new line, but write doesn't do like this. So this is my first file. This is written on this part of the line, and immediately next to this line you see that this is a text file. The next statement has been written. So actually when you write data in a text file using Python, that entire data is considered only one string. So this is just a one string. So data in Python file is always in the form of string. If you write a data, that is going to be in the form of string. Read the data from a text file, that is going to be stored as a string. So we are going to discuss that later on. So what do we do? How do we fix this? If I want to use this write to write data in my file, but I want this to be printed in two different lines, what I have to do is I have to break the line here. So what you can do is you can simply say, okay, just start this next statement in a new line. So you can simply write \n. So first this is going to be written in first line, and then when you write data, this is going to be \n is going to be translated into a next line. So \n is going to break the line, and this is a text file going to be written in the next line. Let's save it and run it, and let's see what happens. When you run it, you see that, so this is my first file and this is a text file in the second line. So you have to manage your data on your own. So this write statement is not going to format your data. If you want to format your data, or you want to write your data in a different format, you have to do that on your own. Okay, there is another method for file object which is called write lines. You can also use that method to write a list of strings. For example, if here we use file underscore id dot write lines, this one. So this takes a list of string. So write only takes one string as an input, but for write lines you can have a multiple string contained in a list. So for example, I can have this IBA and students. So write lines is accepting a list, and this list contains two strings. Let's see what happens if we run this file. Let's save it and run it, and let's check the file. So you see that this is my first file, and this is your first line, and the second line starts from the second line. This is a text, and this list has been printed next to the second line because we have not started with a new line. If you would like to start with the new line, you have to tell this write method that things have to be written in new line. So let's change it. If we would like to print all these things on different lines, we can break this line here. We can start with a new line here, and you can start with a new line here. Let's see what happens. You run it and see the data in the text file, and we see that now everything has been written on new line because we have used the \n character. So this is my first file, this is a text file, and then these two items in the list have been written on two different lines because of the \n character. Okay, let's now comment this because we don't need it anymore, and work with some different example. Suppose that we have a data of employees, we have their names and we have their salaries, and we are going to write this data in a text file in column format, so that the first column has name, the second column has salaries, and we are going to increment these salaries by 10%. So the third column is going to have their new salaries with 10% increment. So let's write this data in column format in a file. So let's first define the data. So first variable is going to be the name of the employees. I'm going to store that names in list. So let's say first name is Abdul, and the second name is John, and third name is let's say it's Julia, and last name is Ito. Okay, now let's define a list of salaries. So salary is a list which has some random numbers. Okay, this is the first salary, second salary, third salary and fourth salary. Okay, so we are going to write this data in a file, and we want to format the data properly. That means that data has to be arranged with proper spacing. There shouldn't be any randomness or arbitrariness in the space between different columns. So in order to format this data with proper spacing, we'll use format method, and we have already discussed about format method in our previous lecture. So please go and watch that lecture before you are able to understand what is going to come now. For that, we are going to open a file. So let's say the file ID is going to be the name of the object that is created by the open keyword, and the file name is the same we used before, text test.txt, and again we are to use this w mode. Is going to tell that we are going to write data in this file. Okay, so now what we are going to write it, we are going to write this name in a column format and the salary in a column format, and then the third column is going to be increment in the salaries by 10%. So for that we are going to use for loop. For I in range, so there are 4 items in the list, so we are going to use 4 here. 4. So what we are going to do is we are going to write. So in this file we are going to write this data. Now data is going to be in such a way that first line is going to consist of, let's say, Abdul, the first entry, and the second entry is going to be the salary, and the third entry is going to be the increment to the salary by 10%. So for that we are going to use, remember we have talked about this format function for string. First entry is going to be the name, so name I, and the second entry is going to be the salary, and ith salary, and third entry is going to be 10% increment to this salary, so we can just multiply by 1.1 to this salary ith. So using this format statement we are constructing a string, and the first entry of the string is going to be this name, so we'll simply use 0 here. 0 means the first position of this function is going to be printed here, and we are going to left adjust the names. So for left adjustment we use this less than sign, and then we are going to reserve some character space for name. So let's reserve 10 character space for names, and then the next entry is going to be the second position here or the first position, and let's again left arrange this data and assign this data again maybe 10 character, and similarly for the last entry which is the second position, and we use this again less than sign is for arranging data on the left side. Salary, they are integers, name is a string, and but 1.1 static salary could be a decimal number. For that I will use okay, I'll use same 10 characters, but now I can have some kind of decimals here, so I will use, let's say, 2 decimal places. There are going to be total 10 character space, and 2 are reserved for decimal places, and this number is going to be float, so for that we use f. So this is how we are going to arrange your data. So this is going to be your rows, first row. When I is 0, this is going to be your first row, so name is going to come here, and the salary is going to come at this position, and this increment is going to come to this position, and every position has taken 10 character space. So we are done with writing this data. Now let's close this file underscore id dot close, and let's see what happens when you run this file. Let's run it, and okay, there's an error here. It says the spelling mistake. It has to be E here. Okay, now let's run this file, save it and run it. Let's see what we get. So this is our folder. So when you open it, you see that there's only one row because we have not used a new line character. So we have to break, when one line is completed, we have to break that line. So \n. So for when I is 0, you are going to get this, and it's going to break a line. So next statement is going to be written on the next line. Now let's save it and run it, and let's see what happens. So you see that our data is now in very nice form. So this is your first column, the second column, and the third column, and every entry has a 10 character space reserved for it. That's why we see the proper spacing between the columns, and there is no randomness here. Okay, let's see now how this A option works. So we have worked with W. W means simply write data in the file. If the file is an existing file, then W is going to override the data in that file. So let's see how this A works. So for A is used to append the data in an existing file. This is our existing file, and this has these values. So now we are going to append some data to this file. For that, what we can do is here we can just use a file identifier. You may use some different file identifier here. You don't have to use the same identifier all the times. And we are going to open the file, same file, test.txt, comma, and A. So when we write A here, we assume that there's an existing file, test.txt. Whatever we are going to write in that file is going to be appended to that file. So let's see how it works. So now I'm going to write here file id dot write. So what I'm going to write here, so let's start with a new line, and I'm going to say that this is the end of the file. Save it and close the file underscore id dot close. Now let's run it and see what happens. We run it, and we open this file. So you see that now nothing has happened to the original data. It's same as before, but this line has been added to the file. This is how append works. Okay, now let's talk about this second option, how to read an existing file. Okay, so let's open this file again. So whenever you have to do anything with the file, first thing you have to do is you have to open your file. File underscore id. So we have an existing file now, and we are going to read data from that existing file. And that existing file is test.txt. And now we are going to use this option R. So R means that now we want to read data from this test.txt file. For read, we use read method. So for file underscore id, we have this method read. So this read is going to read the entire data at once, and you can store that data in some variable. Let's call that variable data. You can give it any name. So data, this data is going to be data from this file. So all the data in this file is going to be stored in this variable data in the form of just one single string. So let's close the file and then print it and see what we get. Dot close, and so print. We are going to print here data. So what this read method has done is, this method has taken all the data from this file underscore id, and this data has been stored in this data variable, and data has been stored in the form of string. and let's print it and see what we get. Save it, and let's see here. So when you run it, you see that the entire data has been stored in this data variable, and this data is just a string. So you may check here. Let's say if you just want to print first entry of this string, you run it, you see that you get only A. So A was the first entry. So this is just a string. This entire data is just one string. You can also read data line by line. For that, there's a function which is called read line. So for example, if you simply open the file here, file underscore id is equal to open, same file, test.txt. Again, we want to read the data, so we have to use R here. And now I don't want to read the entire data in one variable. I just want to read data line by line. So for example, for that I can use file underscore id, and there is a method called read line. So read line is going to read data line by line. So read line, and here let's store the first line in data1. This is one variable, and if you use this method again, then you will get the second line. Okay, so let's copy and paste this here. So let's store this in another variable data2. So first time you use read line, you are going to get first line in this variable. Second time you use read line, you are going to get second line in data2 variable. Let's close this file. File underscore id dot close, and now print data1 and print data2. You'll see that you get two lines, data2. Let's save it and run this. Okay, there's an error. Okay, there has to be a dot here. Control S, save it, and you see that. So data1 gives you the first line and data2 gives you the second line. This is how you can read data line by line. There is another function here by the name of read lines. If you would like to read the entire data in the form of a list, you can do that as well, and let's try it here. So let's open the file again. File underscore id is equal to open. So we can just simply comment this part because we don't need it anymore. This part, comment from till here. Okay, we open the file again, and test.txt, and we want to read the file, so we use R here. Now I want to read the entire data not in the form of string but in the form of list, where every entry of the list is a line of the data. So let's define a variable data, and I'm going to use this file identifier and use this method write lines, this method. So write lines method is going to store the entire data in data, but now this data is going to be list, and every member of the list is a line of the data. So file underscore id, let's close this file. You close it, and when we run it, before we run it, we just want to print the data and see what is inside the data. And okay, let's print it. Write line takes only one argument. Okay, sorry, this is read lines. We are not using write lines. So read lines, Control S, and then run it. So this is how you get data stored in the list when you use read lines. So first line becomes the first entry of the list, ended by \n. Remember, we use this \n here in this when we were writing the data. So \n. So you also get that \n in your list, and similarly you get the second line, third line, and the last line. So this is how we can store the entire data in the form of a list. It depends on your need how you would like to use the data stored in a file and perform some kind of operations in your code. So now we are going to discuss how to read some particular part of the data from your file. So for example, I have this file and I want to read only the second column of this file, which consists of the salaries of the employees, and I want to calculate average of these salaries. For that, we remember when we read data from Python, from these files, that data is going to come in the form of string. Let's say if I read data line by line, so if I read the first line, then this line is going to be in the form of string. So I'm going to convert this string in the form of list, so that this second entry is the second entry of the list. So I'm going to repeat this process, the same process for all these 4 rows. For that, first we have to open the file. So let's use the same file identifier, file ID, and we are going to open the file, and that's an existing file, so which is test.txt, and we are going to read the file, so we have to use this option R here. And now I have to read these lines one by one, and these are 4 lines, so I'm going to use for loop for that. For I in range 4, and I'm going to read the line. For that, I'm going to use read function, read line method, file underscore id dot read line. So the first line is going to, when I is 0, the first line is going to be stored in this line variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first get rid of the leading and trailing spaces. If there are spaces here or there are spaces before this name, I'm going to get rid of those spaces first. For that, I'm going to use strip. So what strip method does is it removes all the leading and trailing spaces from the string. And then I'm going to use the method split. So split method is going to convert this string in the form of list, and that list I'm going to store in a variable called list. Let's call it list. So now this list is a list which contains these 3 entries, 1, 2, and 3, but all the 3 entries are in the form of string. So I have to, if I have to work with this the second entry of the list, I need to convert this string in the form of a integer or float, whatever I need. Okay, and before that I'm going to have define an empty list here. So let's call it employees salary, and I'm going to store these numbers in this list, and this list is an empty list. So what I can do is here I can say, okay, append in this list em underscore salary. This is an empty list. Append to this list what the second entry of the list. So okay, let me just repeat it again. So this list is going to be list of these entries of the first row, and we are going to in this empty list we are going to append the first entry, which is the first position. So this is 0 position and this is first position. We're going to store that in this salary. But remember, this is a string. Everything is in the form of string, so we have to convert this into numbers. For that we use eval function in Python. So eval is going to convert this entry into a number. Okay, so now we are done. So for when I ranges from 0 to 4, we are going to have in this empty list by the name of employee underscore salary, all these values of the second column. So we are done here. If you want to see that list, we can just simply print it here. Okay, let's first close the file. Close. So file underscore id dot close. So we have closed the file. Now let's see if you want to check what is inside this em underscore salary, we can just print it and see. Print uh, em underscore salary. Let's run it and see what happens. So there's an error. Okay, so this error is because we have used 4 inverted commas instead of 3. Just save it and run it and see what happens. This variable em underscore salary is a list which contains all the salaries which were in the second column of this file. Now if you want to calculate the average, we can simply calculate the average. Sum is a function which is going to sum all the entries of the list, and then we are going to divide this by length of this em underscore salary. So this is going to give you average of the salary. So okay, let's run it and see. So this is the average of these salaries. So this is how you can read data from any part of your file. So there is another method, another very important method that I'm going to discuss here. Is called by the name of seek. So before we discuss that method, let's comment this part. So we are going to discuss seek method available for the file objects. So the method we are going to discuss is this seek method. Okay, so seek method, using seek method, actually you can decide, let's say this is your text file, you can decide at what position you would like to read, you would like to start reading your file. For example, if you, let's say you want to skip these many characters and you want to start reading your file from here, you can do that using seek methods. So let's see how it works. So let's open the file underscore id. So we are going to open the same file, text test.txt, and we are going to read that file R. And so now I will use the seek method, and I'm going to skip, let's say, the first 20 character of this file, and then I'm going to read after that. So if you would like to skip let's say first 20 position of the file and then start reading after that, so we can use the seek method for that. So file underscore id dot, you can see that there is a seek method here. This is this one. So seek, and I'll just, it takes one input. So when I write 20 here, that means I want to skip 20 characters before I start reading the file. So now you can read, let's say data is equal to read, okay, file underscore id dot read. Remember, this read function is going to read the entire file as a string and going to store in data. But now since we have used this seek function, so now the file is, we are going to get the data after the first 20 character of the file. So let's close the file, close. Okay, file underscore id dot close, save it, and let's print this variable data and see what we get. Control S, and let's run it. Okay, when you run it, you can see that these are, okay, if you remember, we reserved 10 character space for this this variable, and then we also reserve 10 character space for this variable. So from here to here there are 20 characters. So you can see that now the file has been read starting from the 21st character. So we get the entire file from this point to this point, but this has skipped the first 20 characters. So these are some of the important functions for writing and reading files in Python. There are some other function as well. So I will send you some readings so you can practice some more functions on your own. Thank you.